a lot of my challenges became more apparent to me when I became a mum. And I think it was a combination of my age, having children when I turned 40, the hormones being what they were, and how that then impacted my ADHD symptoms.
From the Understood Podcast Network, this is ADHD Aha, a podcast where people share the moment when it finally clicked that they, or someone they know, has ADHD. My name is Laura Key. I'm the editorial director here at Understood. And as someone who's had my own ADHD aha moment, I'll be your host. Sam, it is so good to be here with you today. Samantha Hiew, award-winning social entrepreneur, keynote speaker, scientist, community builder, and storyteller. And maybe most importantly at this moment for my mental health, in London, which means I get to do this in the morning, my time, which I never get to do because it's afternoon your time. Sam, I usually have to do these interviews in the afternoon when my meds are wearing down. So I appreciate your geolocation.
We're kind of swapped here, aren't we? So this is the afternoon for me. So you're going to get a bit unfiltered conversation from me.
Okay, I look forward to that. Great. Sam, I'm going to dive into some questions. First, give us a few sentences. Tell us about ADHD Girls.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. It just feels like a lifetime ago now, but I started ADHD Girls as an Instagram account when I was looking for answers for my own ADHD assessment. It all really began before I even got diagnosed. And really, I was just trying to figure out, what the women experience is, with ADHD, because at the time, it felt like there was more conversation, around this topic, but still it was so underrepresented in terms of who was talking. And for someone like me who came from Asia and moved to the UK, it felt as though every single story that I was listening to were, people native to this country who were born here. And obviously, as a cross-cultural woman who spent half of my life in Asia and half of my life in the UK, it felt as though there was no one I could go to really compare my experience. And so, when I got diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 40, I then decided to go really serious with ADHD Girls and founded this as a company, a social impact company with a dual mission to empower neurodivergent women and girls to thrive in society and to improve neurodiversity understanding through an intersectional lens because of where I came from. And from then on, ADHD Girls, kind of grew from a platform, with a community of women with ADHD to now I have spoken at over, 80 corporate companies, FTSE companies, S&P companies, and really training them on what neurodiversity looks like through intersectional lens.
Tell me more about what was going on during that time when you were starting ADHD Girls, questioning what was going on with you. Talk to me about your challenges and everything.
I realized what I did was actually quite common in terms of what other neurodivergent women were doing when they were looking for answers. So for me at the time, I became a new mum. And it was a second time mum after a long break. So there are 5 years between two of my children. And so I think I was in the perfect storm of having given birth, turning 40. And then the pandemic hit. It was a transition between becoming a mother again and then going back to my career. And so there were, a lot of changes that were going on biologically in my body, neurologically, and also my lifestyle was completely turned around because I had to stay up in the night to breastfeed my new son. And so there were a lot of changes. So I had what I thought I wouldn't get again, postnatal anxiety, when he had trouble feeding. And as a woman, there's so much that's focused on you, whether you could breastfeed this new human that's landed on Earth who relies on you for everything. And you feel a bit like a failure when you can't provide him or her with the thing that he needs the most. And so that gave me so much anxiety around whether I could do it or not. And then, that was just part of the story, really. And, I think the other part was actually realizing that having another child wasn't just plus one. It felt like, it was just something that is totally unmanageable for me.
Totally. It feels like you now have 3 or 4 children when you do that.
Yeah.
So
do you mind if I pick my squishy up? Because I just dropped it.
Oh, absolutely. Pick up your squishy.
Here it is. Right. Cool.
So you're in this moment, this pressure cooker moment. What was it that made you start to think, is this ADHD? Because it's got to be hard to pick that out of all of that.
I guess I was on Instagram quite a lot at the time because I started my own soft furnishing business before that. And so I became a bit of an Insta mum. And
Wow.
So that's what they call it, right? I mean, the Insta mum. And then I came across someone I was following, and she talked about her ADHD experience. And she was also somebody who ran a successful business. I look up to her, and I just could never imagine that someone successful could have ADHD. I know, as cliche as it sounds now. So the more I read, the more it felt like, this sounds like me. So then I was really curious, and I got in touch with a psychologist who said, oh, why don't you come on LinkedIn Live with me? And I was like, but I don't have a diagnosis. But I did it anyway, and like 1,000 people turn up to listen to what I have to say on ADHD in women. So it was a very well received session. But then I just thought, we're onto something here, and that then kickstarted my social media campaign where I interviewed women with ADHD around the world. And what was interesting also is that I covered an intersectional experience. And that helped people from all over the world, get in touch. And I think everything just snowballed from there. I hosted the Neurodivergent Women and Girls panel for Neurodiversity Celebration Week. And I was having messages from people from where I came from in Asia who said, wow, it's so nice to see somebody who looks like me, in hosting and leading that session. And so, that felt so meaningful because it was not just a business anymore. It was an identity. And with this identity, it was a purpose.
I would love to hear you talk about your multicultural experience and how that intersects with AuDHD.
So I come from a Southeast Asian background, and people from my culture were primed to achieve, to look for educational attainment and, career success as the pinnacle of our achievement. And because I came from a country that was a third world country when I grew up, and there was a lot of pressure from everywhere, especially in the Chinese culture too, to become a doctor, an engineer, an architect, a lawyer. And so there is definitely this cultural connotation that then makes it hard for us ADHDers to be discovered.
Yeah.
On the surface, we look like we're crushing it. We've done really well. We've got those straight A's, and, we've got the big cars or the, house. But really, it's the mental health, challenges underneath all that. So, but then with cross-cultural individuals, especially from the Asian background, it can be really hard for them to figure out what neurodivergence look like for them. And it's so interesting because maybe it's the setup that they have within their community, that inter-reliance, because there's a lot of that inside the Asian culture where people rely on each other, and some families have 3 generations that still live in the same house. That level of support is in some ways too close for comfort, but in other ways, is an ADHD dream. There's always someone to body double with you. There's someone to pull, to pick up the slack if you are struggling to do something. And so for me, if I was in Malaysia still, I think there would be much more support in terms of family, being there. My mum would surely drop off, food, which is amazing because when you're looking after children, the last thing, the other thing you need to think about is cooking for them. And that could be sorted in a inter-reliant culture. Whereas I live here and I am self-reliant. And I think that's part of the reason why my ADHD traits have worsened when I moved across the world.
What you were saying about community it really resonated with me. I had a family, my family had a family move in with us during the pandemic for a variety of reasons. We needed each other. That was one of the best times of my entire life. I've mentioned that on this
It's
show.
amazing.
And it's not, and I absolutely don't want to diminish what other people went through during the pandemic, because I know that it was horrific for so many people. But I had never thought about it that way until what you just said about community, and like you can body double all the time.
Yes, I talk
It
about
was
this dream.
powerful.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Because is it Dr. William Dodson that says the definition of a perfect ADHD relationship is if you have the starter and the finisher. And if you think about it,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. I'm thinking
yeah.
of the people who lived with me. I'm like, there was the starter, there was the finisher. There was the one who took the kids when I would start to lose my temper, and the one who could make me laugh, and the one who would take out the garbage. And
Yeah, that is still a dream that I keep looking
you
forward
can come
to
move in
one
with
day.
me.
Yes, please. I'll do it in a heartbeat.
Tell me about the ADHD symptoms that you were experiencing that really were adding to what was going on with you.
A lot of my challenges happened and became more apparent to me when I became a mum. And I think it was a combination of my age, having children, and I turned 40, the hormones being what they were, and how that then impacted my ADHD symptoms. So a lot of that symptom was that persistent anxiety. So I became a bit boring, where I would obsess about, what my kids should eat. And that was totally different to what I used to be before, where I was quite carefree. And that level of obsession was not really me, or not the me that I knew. So it was that need for control and trying to remember, what I was doing in a room when I went in there, because I always had really good memory.
Yeah.
Maybe not immediate memory, but I could remember things like, when I need to get to an appointment, what I was supposed to do, which is contradictory, right? And now I think that's a combination of being AuDHD, autistic and ADHD.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, because I was obviously just pursuing that ADHD diagnosis, and I wondered why it did not fully encapsulate my experience. And after I got diagnosed, then people were saying that I could potentially be autistic too. And if you look back, then, it all kind of makes sense, because I love science. I always need to know the process of how, things happen. I want to be told what's going to happen ahead of time, before I go through it. I do have persistent anxiety, and I am very literal, have been told I was really blunt, and sometimes unable to really understand social rules.
It's so common for ADHD and autism to coexist. Tell us a little bit about what that means for you, having both ADHD and autism.
So for now, this current present, because I feel
Yes,
sometimes
tell me about now.
yeah, because I kind of go back and forth, in terms of what it means to me. It's because when you get diagnosed and you identify with more than one neurodivergent label, then you kind of relook your life and think how is it kind of changed, throughout time. And for me, being ADHD is like you're a mystery wrapped in an enigma to yourself. It's like you know that you want one thing one day, and then the next day you wake up, you kind of want something else. Having that need for novelty and change, but then also really love that routine and, need to know what's ahead. It is a contradiction. I think it's really helped me understand myself, but also helped me understand why I would sometimes appear quite confusing to people, quite inconsistent.
Give me an example. That's interesting.
Maybe I would appear to be one way to someone, I'll, have that need for control, where I am, and need to just know what's going on. And then the next day I'll think, let's book a holiday 8 months ahead and to a totally random place. And so I would look like this person who just is two different person in one. In fact, my ex used to call me Jekyll and Hyde.
How do you feel about that tension? I'm using the word tension. Maybe it's a joy, I don't know, of having those kind of two sides.
Yeah, I think it really depends, because if I'm able to figure out, the best parts of me when I have these two different sides, then obviously I'm going to be nice to myself. But a lot of the work has been trying to understand why, I have struggled to say regulate my emotions during times when other people could easily do. Like, for example, the older I get, the more sensory challenges I have. What I do struggle with is the meltdown, that is caused by sensory challenges that no one really can understand. And even me, I have tried to be aware of what my triggers are, and that is something that still gets me. But I'm working on the acceptance of myself.
Tell me what a meltdown, what might cause a meltdown and what that meltdown looks like. Are you comfortable talking about that?
Yeah, so I think it's more, say, if I haven't had a good sleep and, my kids might be quite noisy, and with that bad sleep quality, then I'm already quite touchy. And so things are louder, they are felt more. And if I know that I start the day off this way, then I need to think about strategies that I can call upon. And my kids are young, right? So I can't expect them to understand either. And so I have to take myself away, from that trigger and try and recuperate, what they call shutdown, where you want to just be in a safe space. And for me, that is in bed, with my headphones in. And if I don't have that to go to, or the sensory inputs were too much and it got to the point of no return, then I might lose my emotional regulation in the moment and end up raising my voice, because it's not even voluntary anymore. What happens when you get a meltdown? It's essentially an amygdala hijacked.
Can you define amygdala for the listeners?
Yeah, the amygdala is in your emotional brain, is the little kind of almond shape structure in your brain that helps you perceive emotions. And so, it is often a structure that they say is enlarged in an autistic individual's brain. And for an ADHD or two, we've been known to go from 0 to 100 because of that emotional flooding. And sometimes being unable to tap into the rational brain to work out what's going on. But when you have sensory challenges, right, the sensory input is directly linked to the emotional gate. So the emotions and sensory section in your brain is connected. So when you are going through sensory overwhelm, that might then look like emotional outbursts. If you can see and recognize the triggers, then it helps you also, avoid them in the future, and also, accept yourself. So that's the hardest part for me, I think, just living with AuDHD.
That does sound really hard. And I find it interesting, Sam, like you were talking before about the Jekyll and Hyde, right? How the ADHD and the autism can seem in contrast with each other or in opposition with each other. But what you just described with the meltdown, that seems like a piece of AuDHD, and correct me if I'm wrong, where they kind of build on each other, ADHD and autism, the emotional regulation, the sensory issues. Yeah.
Yeah, it does look like that. It's still a mystery to me because we're so used to defining autism and ADHD separately. But what if it coincides in one person? It's not as though they're two different sides, They all come down to, I guess, you have a very distinct neurophysiological structure and distinct biochemical compositions, So this is an area that still needs a lot of research. Understanding what you're made of, is really the first step. Then you can think, how can I mitigate this, and I accept myself for who I am, and also being kinder to yourself as well. Because really, sometimes that's all you have, right? If people cannot see this, then it can lead to a lot of misunderstanding.
Sam, tell me what you were like as a child, and in relationship to what we've been talking about with AuDHD.
That's really interesting because I was asked this question before. Like, so as a child, I was I was very talkative, apparently. I was very active. I was always full of beans, and I would
Did you say full of beans?
Yeah, it's an English term for.
I love it.
Like you're kind of like you've always got loads of energy, always up to something.
That's cute. I like that.
And so I was very active. Wasn't really into studies very much.
Yeah.
Most of my time was spent in the athletic field. I was more of a short distance sprinter, which helped get me through school actually. And then when I got to secondary school, I went to a school without a field, so that really didn't help. So
bummer.
That was also the start of a lot of the challenging ADHD traits that came.
Yeah, like what?
The kind of daydreamy space cadet. But before that, there was also the impulsivity.
Did you get into trouble?
Loads of it, mostly at home,
Tell me about getting into trouble. I don't know. I just think it's fun. You're so accomplished. We can.
Oh no,
you don't want to talk about it.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because I was mentoring a teen girl yesterday actually for her TED talk, and we were talking about how that period, just when you enter puberty and you're doing things that confuse you, and sometimes they don't even make any sense. They're just fun. So yeah, I would do really naughty things at home and get into trouble with my mum.
You're not going to share what some of the naughty things were?
No, because it's far too embarrassing.
I'll stop asking then. So you mentioned puberty also, Sam, and before we were talking about, hormonal changes with having a child. And tell me about your experience with just in general, like hormones and ADHD and what you notice about yourself.
It's such an important topic because when we look at the gender differences between men and women with ADHD, it's for us, it is the hormones, that really changes a lot of our presentation biochemically. But then, when you think about the social rules that the girls have been, subscribing to since they were young, then we also get another presentation. I definitely have quite strong traits that become more apparent during these large hormonal transitions, during puberty, pregnancy, perimenopause, the 3 Ps. And this is literally when your brain and your body, is remodeling. And for someone with ADHD, potentially autism, that meant a lot of the changes that was happening was affecting my nervous system, and changing the way that I behave, in ways that would confuse me, but also then, confuse the people around me. And definitely in teenage years, especially in the early parts, I had a lot of challenges at home being this person that's quite naughty. I was taken to the police station once because I've done something that naughty.
I want to know what you did. You won't tell me. It's not fair, Sam.
But you can only air the things that you've gotten over, right? And this is still something that I'm talking about in therapy. But that
you
happened
really don't
when
have to tell me.
Yeah,
you just keep teasing it,
Yeah. But this happened when I was 11, so I didn't do anything that bad really. But then because in my mum's eye, there was no way she could discipline me. So then that was the only way. But then I got to the police station and the police laughed anyway because they was like, what? You brought her here for this? There's no law around this.
When you're ready to talk about it, Sam, I want you to come back on the show, even if it's just 5 minutes, and you're going to tell us what you did. Okay? You promise?
Yeah, I will actually, maybe. Yeah.
So the 3 Ps, puberty, pregnancy, and perimenopause, and the body and brain are remodeling. It's so succinct and helpful for us to think about as women. That's really interesting. Thank you for that.
Well, it's not me who came up with it. It's Dr. Lisa Mosconi.
You can take credit for it, but I appreciate your humility.
I take credit for reading her book. But yeah, she's awesome. She's doing a lot of research into women's hormones and dementia. And also, I don't think she's mentioned neurodivergence as yet, but I can just see the link, because if you think about our brain and our hormones being remodeled, this is also the time when your body is undergoing significant transition. So we know that estrogen affects dopamine, acetylcholine, and serotonin. These are the three key neurotransmitters that regulate, not just our ADHD traits, but the executive function, the mood, our sense of happiness and well-being, and also our ability to sleep, and regulate our emotions. There is a ton of things in here. And for me, even until now, what I thought was strange about my ADHD was that during the good parts of my menstrual cycle, I don't actually need medication. And it is only during the luteal phase that I feel that, oh gosh, what's happened?
What's the luteal phase? Can you explain for folks who don't know? And I might be one of those people who don't know, but I'll just say for the people who don't know.
So we have different phases of our menstrual cycle where there are a lot of hormonal changes that are happening, right? But basically, estrogen rises, up until the period of time where we get to ovulation. And then after ovulation, estrogen starts to dive. And then we get to luteal phase, which is early luteal phase, the week before our period. And then, we get into the menstruation. So the luteal phase is the time when people usually get their premenstrual syndrome. And for many neurodivergent women, they tend to report that they have something called premenstrual dysphoria, which you would know about, having interviewed so many people.
Yes.
And this is also something that a lot of women struggle with. Some people struggle with that 20 days in a month, so it's not just that week before, it's the whole month except for that one sunshine week,
Yeah, this is something that I personally actually have had to, work on with doctors and people in my tribe. Basically, it is really, really difficult. The luteal phase terminology had escaped me, but we can call it the bad days, right?
Yeah. So I divide them into 4 different seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. So the luteal phase to me is that period between fall and winter where you're just diving into abyss of despair.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's going to be the same for everyone. I'm not even saying that it's going to be the same for you every month too, because it's going to change because there's so many variables, within our lives that can change how we sleep, how we eat, how we feel, which then, also contributes to how we function cognitively and how we feel. So it's like a loop, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it is during, the challenging parts of my cycle that I tend to feel that this is a little bit out of my control. And what can I do?
Sam, tell me more about what you're working on. Tell us more about your work and anything that you want to plug.
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot at the moment. So I am working on creating a more comprehensive neuro-inclusive program for organizations. And so at the moment, I do a lot of neurodiversity awareness sessions and people managers training and a lot of fireside chats and panel discussions. But I am creating a package that would help companies to support not just the company awareness, but also management training and employee well-being and support. Because I know we're talking a lot about hormones in this episode, but my fascination is always within the biological, needs that we have. And actually, a lot of our challenges may not even, manifest if we get our biological needs, supported. And then we think about our emotional needs and our relationship needs. And so that's what I'm working on at the moment. Also, I'm doing a lot of writing. Maybe a book might be in the pipeline.
Ooh, okay. Well, when you come back to tell us about your naughty mischief, you can tell us maybe about your book if you're ready to share. So now you have two reasons to come back. Yeah. Well, Sam, it's such a pleasure to chat with you. The website is adhdgirls.co.uk. Everyone check it out. Yes.
Yeah. I also have a speaker website called samanthahiew.com, and that's more to do with my corporate work. But yeah, ADHD Girls covers all the workshops that I do for the community, as well as everything else.
Well, we'll put links to everything in the show notes. It's been really lovely to talk to you. And I don't think it's just because we're doing this in the morning for me. That was nice, but it's really, you do so much. And the fact that you're a scientist on top of all of the advocacy work that you do, the perspective that you bring is really eye-opening. I really appreciate you, Sam. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Laura.
As always, if you want to share your own aha moment, email us at ADHDaha@understood.org. I'd love to hear from you. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. We have more resources and links to anything we mentioned. This show is brought to you by understood.org. Understood is a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people with learning and thinking differences like ADHD and dyslexia. If you want to help us continue this work, donate at understood.org/give. ADHD Aha is produced and edited by Jessamine Molly. Say hi, Jessamine.
Hi, everyone.
And Margie DeSantis.
Hey, hey.
Video was produced by Calvin Knee. Our theme music was written by Justin D. Wright, who also mixes the show. Ash Beecher is our supervising producer. Brianna Berry is our production director. Neil Drumming is our editorial director. Creative and production leadership from Scott Koshier and Seth Melnick. And I'm your host, Laura Key. Thanks so much for listening.